going to kick things off as we do every day on the show with our afternoon update, catching you up on all that has happened, all these stories that matter most. And joining me for the afternoon update today, Kieran Cunningham, the chief sports writer with the Daily Star, and Sinead Ryan, presenter of the Home Show here on Newstalk. Kieran, we actually might start with a sporting story. So Andy Farrell is going off to the Lions, the least surprising sports story of the day.
Yeah, it's been well signposted. It's a great honour for him. It's always a huge notch on any coach's or a huge addition to his as a coach's CV to have coached the Lions. It is a kind of an odd one this time, I think, because it's Australia. And Australia are such a low ebb. The World Cup, they lost to Fiji. A pretty average Wales team beat them 46. And Eddie Jones, had to walk on a sword after that World Cup. Whether the Wales can turn things around in 18 months' time for that tour, because as things stand, if England, Scotland, Ireland or Wales were touring Australia, I think they would all be pretty confident of winning a tour series. So with the combined team with the Lions, the expectations will be huge. It's very different to go to New Zealand or South Africa. I think this is time they'll be very much hot favourites, but it can only help Ireland as well, because Farrell will have that experience. And the more coaching experience you get at a high level, and there's a lot of self-mythologizing around the Lions. I was
going to ask that. I mean, beyond, would you move past the kind of the Sky sportsification of it all over the last 20 years? Is it still what it once was for the players and the coaches?
I think it can be overpowering in the build-up. Because I know that from about a year to 18 months out, you get bombarded by emails from line sponsors, etc. They really do a hard sell.
The Ryder Cup.
Yeah, and the Ryder Cup's very similar in that. And they also, they rerun the old speeches and the old documentaries, and it's all built up. And that can become a bit wearying. But by the time the test matches come around, you strip all that away and just watch it. It's really high-level sport. It is that the Lions test matches historically over the years have been incredible. Hopefully they can be this time, but Australia need to get back on the horse very, very quickly. But I'm delighted for Farrell because he's such a likeable guy. I think he's one of the most popular figures in Irish sport. And he's rightly recognised as one of the best coaches in the world.
Sinead, as a huge Irish rugby fan, have you reservations about losing our head coach?
I do. We will miss him. And actually, more than that, as a Munster fan, I've reservations about losing Paul O'Connell with him. There's going to be all change, at least for a while, because he won't go out there alone, and we'll lose him for a bit before with all the hype. And, you don't want Andy Farrell taking his eye off the ball as far as Ireland is concerned, that's for sure. I wonder personally, Kieran, will it put him in the invidious position now of becoming his son's coach? Because if Owen Farrell is selected for the Lions team, and I know he's pulled away from some international duties for personal reasons, that would be a tough one. I always feel sorry for him, and this is just the mammy in me, watching Ireland against England and knowing that your dad is cheering for the other team, so it's pretty bad. I think it's fantastic. No, I agree. It's for the greater good of both his CV, and he's done so well for Ireland, and maybe he'll come back then with added oomph for us for the World Cup next time around.
You obviously will lose, as Sinead says, you will lose him for the Six Nations next year, but Simon Easterby has to step up, and that's great for Simon Easterby. Yeah. You can see what, he's effectively having an open audition to be Andy Farrell's successor down the line by having that shot at the Six Nations as head coach. And a lot of the coaching staff, is obviously Andy Farrell as head coach, but it's a massive coaching staff, and a lot of those will still be in place. So hopefully it won't affect Ireland too much. And it'll be interesting because there's always political pressure then coming to the selection. And he'll get a bit of flack if it's not a lot of Ireland players.
They will want him to pick whoever he wants, because from the Lions' point of view, they'll say, bring the best package you can with you. So you would worry a little bit that some people will be absent then from have their eye off the ball on the Irish side. Certainly in terms of the next Six Nations.
Rugby, I guess, has gone the way of other sports, like Olympic cycles, and it operates now in World Cup cycles, doesn't it? So, as Six Nations go, the next two Six Nations are arguably not as important as the two that come afterwards.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
a
fair?
good point. Yeah, I think
but also,
so.
like, this is stuff we can win right now, so it does matter.
Yeah, well,
I
it
think.
matters in that sense. Yeah, I guess we can win Six Nations. We haven't got past the quarter-final yet in the World Cup. Anyway, listen, there'll be plenty more conversation about that, I'm sure, on Off the Ball tonight at 7 o'clock, as always. We're going to be talking later in the show. I mentioned that doctor from Gaza we're going to be chatting to. We'll get an update as well from The Hague. So we have the first day of South Africa's genocide case, effectively, against Israel, taking place before the International Court of Justice today, Sinead.
Yeah.
This is just kind of the opening arguments. Is that what we're hearing?
That's all we're going to get today and tomorrow. And in fact, if the court, as I understand it, decides to hear a wider case, you know, it's something that would take years rather than a quick hit. So this is very much, I think, a ploy by South Africa to just raise the volume on this issue of genocide. It's bringing Israel to The Hague in violation, it says, of the 1948 Genocide Convention, which ironically was brought in after World War II and the Holocaust. And it's saying that it effectively says that genocide is when it's perpetrated on an ethnic group of people or on racial grounds. And it's saying because it's against the people of Gaza, that is an ethnic minority. Now, I think... I wonder, now Israel, of course, have said this is the height of hypocrisy and, you know, coming from South Africa and all that. But I just wonder, is really now this going to be the tail that wags the dog? Because the only response that matters now, more than I think probably the Court of Justice, will be the American response. Anthony Blinken has been out in Israel now and seems to me to be talking, as the Americans sometimes do on this, out of both sides of their mouths. So on one side, they're completely rejecting South Africa taking this, saying it's irresponsible, blah. And the other side, they're asking the Israelis maybe to do more to cut down on maybe the civilian attack. So I think that's where we'll look on this, and The Hague will just provide that loud voice behind it.
When you look at the countries, Kieran, that have aligned themselves with South Africa and have joined this legal campaign, it's kind of South American countries, it's Arabic and other predominantly Muslim countries, and that is it. There's no what you might describe as a kind of a Western democracy in there. There's certainly no European countries in there. Turkey, at a stretch, you might describe as European. Does that mean that this is a kind of a sideshow from what might actually have any influence on the ground in Gaza? And as Sinead says, it really is down to kind of the bigger partners like the Americans.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a sideshow because, it is such a high-profile event, and it will be making global headlines when it comes out. Like I can't see them winning the case because they're just up against the superpowers, particularly the Americans who generally back Israel to the hilt. Like some of this, there's an Irish barrister, Blinen Ugrali, who's a part of the South Africa legal team, and a lot of her opening statement was really impressive. And there's one of the points she makes is the first genocide in history being broadcast in real time. And, you know, there's reasons to be sceptical about a lot of footage you see, particularly online and through social media, various wars, but there's a lot of verified footage and a lot of verified reporting that out of what's happened in Gaza, and it's pretty appalling. Like there's another. She mentioned a new acronym that had come out of Gaza: WCNSF, Wounded Child, No Surviving Family, and that is unspeakably grim. And I was just actually reading a book recently called This Mortal Coil, but it's a history of death through the centuries. But it focuses a lot on how various diseases, the origin of various diseases, etc. And so many of them came from dirty water and not proper sanitation. And already, and this came out in the Hague today, 4 out of 5 people suffering from famine in the world now are in Gaza because of what's happened in recent months. And that all has an impact when people are piled together into refugee camps, etc. That has an impact on water and sanitation, and that all leads to more disease. So what's happening there is just unspeakable. And I think there has been pressure on Ireland Ireland has been an outlier in many ways in Europe in its support for Gaza, but it hasn't joined this case. And I can see why a lot of people aren't happy with that.
We actually have a little clip of Blinnan Ní Grálaigh, who you mentioned there, Kieran, before the International Court of Justice today. Take a listen.
The daily statistics stand as clear evidence of the urgency and of the irreparable prejudice. On the basis of the current figures, on average, 247 Palestinians are being killed and are at risk of being killed each day, many of them literally blown to pieces. They include 48 mothers each day, 2 every hour, and over 117 children each day, leading UNICEF to call Israel's actions a war on children.
Yeah, that was Blinnan Ní Grálaigh speaking a little bit earlier this afternoon. That case is ongoing. And like I said, after 5 o'clock, we're going to be speaking to a doctor from the UK, but just back from 2 weeks in Gaza, operating on some of those children that we've mentioned there. So that, like I say, after 5 o'clock, well worth staying tuned in for. We might stick with international news because, Sinead, a couple of days ago in this very slot in the afternoon update, we were talking about the fact that Donald Trump was in court. He was in court because he was claiming immunity against criminal prosecution for what happened on January 6th, the Capitol riots or insurrection, however you want to describe them. He is back in court today in New York, but it's an entirely different case. This time it is about exaggerating the value of his property portfolio to get more favourable loans. One of the, I think, 71 legal cases pending against Donald Trump.
What are the chances? Look, it's hard to overstate the ridiculousness of some of the stuff that Trump has been involved in, but these court cases kind of take the biscuit. What happened this morning, like Irish time, and there's no suggestion that Trump had anything to do with this, but there was a bomb threat made to the Florida judge to his home. He is Judge Gorn, who's been a frequent critic of him and in fact has found him in violation, liable for fraud, and put him under a gag order not to abuse court staff, which you wouldn't think you'd have to do. And then because it was violated that order, he has fined him $15,000. So it has really got to the stage now where, we all remember the riots at Capitol Hill and how just unbelievable they were. That there was an American Goo-boo moment for sure. But Trump's supporters, it seems, have not gone away. They are still out in force. It doesn't seem to make the slightest bit of difference what he does, what he says, how he goes about his business. He will be supported. He famously said before the last election that he could shoot someone in Times Square and he'd still be voted, or he'd still get in.
He is, Kieran. He is manifest. He has made manifest that old idea that there's no such thing as bad publicity. You know, hasn't he? This is the same playbook we saw 4 years ago and 8 years ago. Just continually be in the headlines.
Yeah, because President Joe Biden made a speech the other day, and he got a lot of praise for the speech. And if you read the transcript, like, it was very well written, it was very well articulated. But I think he's making a mistake. It was very much focused on Trump as well. And that seems to be very much the way they're going to go with this campaign, and keep pointing out that they think he's a flawed character and etc. But I honestly think the people, there's a cult of Donald Trump, and cults don't really engage with logic or facts. And I think, everything has been, it was thrown, we saw all the stuff that came out during Trump's first election campaign. It made no difference. Like, people did not care. The people who support Trump did not care. And all these cases that have been taken against Donald Trump, like, if he was convicted of something, there would be civil war in America. Like January 6th would, be a tea party compared to what would happen, because there's tens of millions in the US who just idolize him and who don't care. They just see anything that's said against him as part of the so-called elite, and that he is their man, and no matter what he does or no matter what he says.
And yet what's kind of perplexing about it all, Sinead, is that those people voted for Donald Trump anyway 4 years ago and he didn't win. And it's college-educated women who are probably going to win the election for him this time.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? And I think you're right. It is that kind of cult following that he has. What might work, I mean, rather than try and change the hearts and minds of intractable forces, what might actually work are some of these cases that have been taken against putting him on the Republican ballot at all. So the GOP ballots at the end of this month are in Iowa and New Hampshire. They're really, really key. And there's cases to have him not listed. Now, it seems to me from what I've read that they are, in one sense, one kind of school of thought is they're doomed to fail, which will make him more popular than ever, so they'll completely backfire. But if they go ahead and he's not even on the ballot, that means that he cannot be selected as the candidate. And that has caused a surge in people like Nikki Haley. Well, actually, I say like people. She's the only one that seems to have served Chris Christie. Dropped out earlier, and Nikki Haley may be the only one then that can come up against him. I somehow think it's going to take a lot more than that. And I mean, look, this can be very amusing from this side of the pond to look at it the same way we looked at Boris Johnson and you know, whoever the last Prime Minister lasted 5 minutes before him. But it's really serious, and it has serious implications. If this war in Gaza and in Ukraine are going to continue into a new Donald Trump administration, I would have genuine fear for the state of the world, the planet at that point.
We're going to be talking about this with Jeff Cooner a little bit later. He is the host of the Cooner Report on WRKO AM 680 radio in Boston. Jeff describes himself as liberalism's worst nightmare. So you can take that as any way you want. Kieran Cunningham, chief sports writer with the Daily Star. Sinead Ryan, presenter of the Home Show here on Newstalk. Thank you both very much for joining me.